Hello, my friends. Welcome to another Friday Reads. So I am outside. We'll see how this goes. I've only got 5 books to tell you about, and the final one I'm going to be having a buddy read discussion in about half an hour with my friend Kathy. So I think I will make an additional portion of this video after I have that discussion. Why have I only got 5 books this week? I have been busy. So yes, not my usual 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11 books. I've been taking an online paint and print with natural dyes course, doing things like this, and I also gave a couple of talks yesterday on natural dyes out at the University of Alberta Botanic Garden. So I was out there all day. I had my audiobook with me, but I decided to just listen to birds instead when I wasn't occupied with talking about natural dyes. It was lovely. I am going to include just a 1-minute video clip at the end, if you want to stay tuned for that, of the mostly about the Aga Khan garden out there. That's their newest feature garden. It's an Islamic style garden with lots of different water features. There's not a whole lot growing yet. It's still early in the season for us here in Alberta, but very, very nice garden. So talking about natural dyes, the book that I recommended to the participants who came to my talks is this one, Wild Color by Jenny Dean. I talked about using trees to get color, and this tree behind me is an amber cherry, and when we pruned it last year, I saved the bits of bark and I made a bright yellow dye on wool with it. And I had this little sample cards to show. Actually, on wool jersey, this is the color that I got. And on wool yarn, I got this yellow color. And then by dipping it in an iron bath, I shifted the color to this olive green yarn. And I did the same thing with embroidery thread, yellow shifted to the green with iron. I talked about using dandelions to make dye. If you remember in my last video, I talked about how passionate I am about dandelions. I have the samples here. Dandelion dye, dandelion dye. The difference between these two is pH. Your tap water is about a pH of 7, it's neutral, but when you put a bunch of flowers or other plant materials in, it tends to make your dye acidic, and with dandelions that's what happens, and you don't get a bright color. So this was the same dye. I put chalk in it, and that's the difference, just bringing the pH back up to 7. So thought I was going to be talking about books and I'm talking about dyes. I can't help it. I'm just so passionate about natural dyes. Anyway, the other thing I did, my sweetie and I caught the tail end of the Maud Lewis exhibit at the Art Gallery of Alberta. So that was cool. You know, when a show comes to town and you think, oh, we've got tons of time to see it, but it was only till the end of May, so we had to put it on the calendar, and it was lovely. So the first book that I'm telling you about, I'm saving the best for last, but this one was pretty darn good too. And speaking of art, so Cane Fire by Shawnee Mutu. It's a collection of poetry, and there's a whole bunch of her art in it as well. She's tried all kinds of unconventional ways of putting words on the page. So this poem, for example, has one word facing one part of an artwork. So you have to go through it all to see the full thing. Just briefly show you the art. And the words are, beware the insider who tries to break out. And there's another great example of her collage artwork. It's a very cohesive collection. It encapsulates these intense moments, I think, from her life history. She was born in Ireland, but as a baby, her parents moved back to Trinidad, which is where she grew up. She talks about, for example, remembering how when she was very small, her grandmother had this keloid bump on her arm that as a kid she really wanted to bite it. And even though that is not an experience I've had, I could really imagine myself as that small child because she just makes everything so vivid. The title, Cane Fire, comes from the sugarcane fields. So I don't think it's the same now in Trinidad, but when she was growing up, there were sugar canes everywhere, which actually reminded me of a graphic novel, No One Else. Is that what it was called? Yeah. No One Else by Kikuo Johnson. That was set on the island of Maui with all the sugarcane fields. And in the images in this graphic novel, you'd see the cane fire, the sugar canes set on fire after the harvest was done. And with this collection of poetry, I could just smell that burning sugar. I think fire is used metaphorically as well in here, but sugar certainly comes up. Like in this poem, When, the word truth dissipates sugar in rain. And in the poem 2,540 Miles, there's a couple of lines that really struck me. Absence stretches full length beside her. Oh, the very next line is about the cane-ashed town. And later on we have blind birds flew through cane fire sweetened air. And there's one last little bit that I've marked. Oh, this poem, which starts out, I am writing a first-person narrative, is about her wedding to a woman. And the font is printed in different colors. The word silver is in silver colored ink, and chocolate cake is brown, spirea fountain is blue. So there's some really unusual experimentation going on, but also these lots of great imagery. I do recommend Cane Fire. Her first novel from way back is Cereus Blooms at Night, and that remains my all-time 5 favorite novels. Cereus Blooms at Night is definitely one of them. I love it. I enjoy all of her writing, actually. And one of my commenters, Barbara Boothling, who I believe lives in Southern California, when I had a video about migrating birds, she recommended this one. Is This Panama by Jan Thornhill. It's a migration story. The illustrations are done by Soyeon Kim. And I'm always glad to get recommendations from you watching me, and especially when they're Canadian. So yeah, Soyeon Kim is from Korea, now lives in Canada, and Jan Thornhill, possibly originally from the States, I'm not sure, but she certainly lives in Canada now. So this is about a Wilson's warbler. It is anthropomorphic. It wakes up towards the end of August and realizes all of his buddies have gone, and so he finds out that he's got to migrate. And he talks to a lot of other migrating creatures. Those are the sandhill cranes, dragonflies. He gets confused when he encounters a city. City lights are certainly a concern for migrating birds, monarchs. So at the end, so this is a nonfiction for kids. Call it a Division 1 nonfiction because it's like the first level. And at the back, there's a map of the route that this little Wilson's warbler would have taken and the route that he should have taken. And there's where he encountered all these other migrating animals. So there's a little bit of information about the different animals and birds who are migrating. At the end, there's an explanation about the many ways that animals can figure out how to get where they're going. I'm not necessarily a fan of anthropomorphization, which is how this story is told, but I think it works fine in this book for kids. But I recently tried an adult book that's written that way called Last of the Curlews by Fred Bodsworth. It was written in 1955 from the viewpoint of this nearly extinct species, and I couldn't stand the bird's voice. He arrives in the Arctic full of a frenzy of he's got to breed, and the prose is just so purple. I couldn't take it. Anyway, I think it works fine for kids. And I love these little drawings in the M papers of different kinds of warblers. And that reminded me of another book, Field Notes from an Unintentional Birder by Julia Zarankin. So it's a memoir. Zarankin is originally from the Soviet Union, moved to Canada, but in this memoir she's writing about how she's kind of auditioning different hobbies. It's quite funny, but insightful, you know, really, it's literary memoir. Anyway, that's how she becomes a birder. And the chapter where all of these little brown birds look the same, and she's amongst experienced birders that can identify all the different warblers, was, yeah, pretty hilarious. The illustrator, Soyeon Kim, I would say this is not her strongest work. I mean, it's subtle. The art is really subtle in here. But she has done a number of picture books in collaboration with Elin Kelsey. And my favorite of those is called Are Stardust. That's a book about, like, where do atoms come from? What are we made out of? It really emphasizes how interconnected we are. to the entire world, the natural world. So it's another one I recommend. And Jan Thornhill, sometimes she illustrates her own picture books. She's written tons of them. And the one of hers that I most strongly recommend is The Tragic Tale of the Giant Auk. It certainly is tragic. I might have mentioned this one in an earlier video, but it bears mentioning again. Yeah. Sticking with nonfiction, but this one is for adults. I listened to the audiobook Metabolical by Robert Lustig. The subtitle, The Lure and Lies of Processed Food, Nutrition, and Modern Medicine. It was read by Charles Constant. Joni. Oh, somebody needs a bit of love. Stop her from barking. All right, down you go. So, Lustig is an endocrinologist. He's also quite bombastic, or that's not the word, hyperbolic, making statements like, we are turning ourselves into foie gras, and the US Medicaid system will be bankrupt in 10 years, or I actually just made up that number, but he has a number, this many years, medical system is going bankrupt. He says processed food is toxic and it's addictive. He says diseases are not druggable. Drugs only treat symptoms, but diseases are foodable. He talks about big food, big pharma, big government. You get the idea of the kind of book this is. So why did I read it? Well, my doctor has told me that my cholesterol level is too high. She's given me until August to bring the levels down, and otherwise, if I don't, she wants me to start on statins. And so I've been investigating other possibilities. And I am going to try reducing the processed food that I eat and see if it makes a difference. I'm not saying that I buy into everything that Lustig has to say. I believe he's got some TED Talks online. I feel like I've heard enough from him. I'm not going to investigate further, but I will look into more recent research about cholesterol. So that's what's going on with that audiobook. And then, much more fun, the next audiobook I picked up was a novel by the Canadian fantasy author guy Gavriel, and his latest one is called All the Seas of the World. Like many of his novels, it's an alternate kind of Renaissance period Europe, Middle East. Actually, I think probably about the 15th century, but alternate. So, like, for example, there's 3 different religions that are quite important in the story, and they parallel the 3 major Western religions. There are cities and countries that are, you can really see the direct parallel to our world. The story is a great big fat sprawling epic. It's 18 hours in audio. It's read by Simon Vance. It's excellent. There are 2 main characters through it, although sometimes the point of view changes quite a bit with, minor characters. There are many, many characters. But, okay, so one of the central characters, her name is Nadia, and when she was young, she was kidnapped by pirates, taken from her farm, and sold into slavery. And she's free now, and she likes to kill members of this group of people, the religious sect that kidnapped her. it's got a lot of war, fighting, geopolitics, romance. The romance parts are the kinds that make me roll my eyes. I took a note of a line, "She read the world in his eyes." Yeah, that's the kind that makes me roll my eyes. However, there is an aspect of the book that really resonated, and that is when the author is talking about how we can be changed, sometimes greatly, by people who only come glancingly into our lives. And they never know what they've done to us. And the same thing with us, that we affect the lives of other people and we never know how much effect we've had on them. So this does come up in the next book I'm going to be talking about. It is starting to rain, so all I'm going to tell you is my final book. I love it so much. It's really, really good. So Kathy and I are going to discuss this very shortly, and then I'm going to come back and tell you what I think about this. I will see you shortly. I'm back to talk about Ali Smith's companion piece. Oh, Kathy and I had a great discussion. Kathy is actually the person who gave me this copy of the book, and she very cleverly bought herself a copy at the same time, so that made it perfect for buddy reading. And what to say? Just it's set during COVID times. It's right up to date. There's the Ali Smith playfulness, love of language, deep compassion in a inventive way of telling a story about our connections with other people. I don't even know what else to say. She always blows me away. This is the book I'm going to hang on to. Normally, after I read a book, I find a new home for it, or it's one from the library. But if it's one that I've purchased, I don't keep it on my shelves. But this one, I'm gonna keep it handy for when I need to be cheered up, for when I need comfort. There's one section in here with a really irritating family, but it's so farcical and funny, so I could feel the outrage and irritation at the same time as I was laughing. So good. Read it. Read it. It's wonderful. So that's my Friday reads. I've got one more little comment about natural dyes, since I'm wearing one of the scarves that I've dyed in exhaust baths. So an exhaust bath is where I use every little bit of the color that's in a dye bath. And so the colors get lighter and lighter and lighter as there's fewer dye particles in it. And this one was dyed in pine needles, and the yellow color is from elecampane, which is a flower that I have in my garden, and the pink is from cochineal. I had done some really bright pink scarves, but just this faded bit of paler pink is what was in the exhaust bath. So let me know if you do natural dyeing, or if you want to know more about natural dyeing. I'm thinking one of these times I will talk about my reference books that I keep at home on natural dyes, and which ones I find useful and why. Well, all of them I find useful. That's why I have those. As I just said, if I don't use them, it goes on to a new home. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.